Welcome to another Learning Blender 2.8 for tabletop wargaming. I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. And this time around, we're going to work on making a ruined brick wall for your miniatures. So here I am inside Blender 2.8, and I am making the assumption that at this point you got a basic understanding of how 2.8 works in terms of the various keys and things like that. So let's just get started here. First things first, since we're just doing 3D modeling for 3D printing, let's go ahead and get rid of the light and the camera, and we're actually going to keep our default cube. We're not going to kill them this time around, we're actually going to use them. So I'm going to start by taking this cube and turning it into our first brick. Now if you don't have a sidebar over here in terms of a bunch of numbers and stuff, let's press T, no not T, press N to bring that up. And then what I want to do is change the dimensions of these numbers here for the X, Y, and Z to be whatever the size of the brick is going to be. I did some measurement of an actual brick from a house here in the United States, and then I kind of doubled in size just because if it's too small, you're really not going to see any cool textures or whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and make my brick be 6 by... Trying to read my handwriting that I just wrote down a minute ago. 2.5 by 3. So there we go. Oh, so if I'm looking straight down, that is our brick. So right now I'm pressing 7, look straight down. That is our brick. And now it's actually pretty easy to turn this into a brick wall using something called the Array Modifier. Alright, so over here on the right hand side, you want to press the little button that looks like a wrench. And before I apply this modifier, let me actually make a few copies of this. So Shift D a few times and just drag it around. So I have like 3 or 4 of them sitting around just for later on. Alright, let's go back to our original block. Go back to our modifiers tab and click on Add Modifier, choose Array. And you'll notice all of a sudden it got bigger because what it did. Let's see if I go into wireframe mode. You can see there's a second block sitting right here. The Array Modifier does basically, I guess, well, it does what it makes sense to me because I use Blender and I'm a programmer, but it creates a regular repeating pattern of the object. So now let me think about this for a minute. So if each of these bricks is about 6 millimeters long, so that's a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch with some spacing, 4 per inch. So let's make this wall be about 6 inches long. So I want to have about 24 bricks because there's about 4 bricks per inch, give or take a bit. These dimensions I entered in earlier are all in millimeters, by the way. All right, so for count, let's change that to 24. And now what you've got here is really just like a whole bunch of just bricks right next to each other. Now, of course, bricks have mortar between them, so you want a little bit of spacing between each brick. So what I'm going to do, keep relative offset here, and instead of 1, let's make it about a 1.25 and see how that looks. And yeah, now I've got a little bit of space in between the bricks. You could probably drop it down a little bit. Let's do 1.2. Cool, I like that, right? So that's looking pretty good. So this is our first layer of bricks. Now I am going to apply that. And now what I've got, instead of having basically a whole bunch of individual bricks, I've got one object made of a whole bunch of just bricks, right? So now there's a whole bunch of bricks in one object here in Blender. Which I'm going to first actually make, let's do this. We're going to do an Array Modifier, because we need a offset grid, right? So with bricks, you've got the first layer sits here, the second layer is kind of offset, and then they kind of go back and forth. So let me do an Array Modifier, except this time, for relative offset, we want to set X to 0, and Y, that's going up on our screen right now, let's set that to 1. Let's do 1.2 as well, give it a little bit of spacing. Yeah, that'd be fine. Now what I can do, I'm actually able to go ahead and apply the offset as it is. Hold on one second here. Oh, you're right. So relative offset, this number here is relative to the size of the brick, right? So 1.2 times the height here is going to be smaller than 1.2 times the width. That's why the space between the X of the brick is larger than the Y. So let me keep bumping this number up a little bit until I got a space between the rows that's similar to the spaces between the bricks. All right. And then what I can do, let me see here. I can set a relative X offset. Yep, I can set a relative X offset to a really small number. And I can use that to get the brick offset. So it's a little bit too much. Let's go 0.024, 0.02. I want to get it aligned right with this green x-axis here. Or is it the y? That's the y-axis. All right, 0.018. Almost got it. 0.017, a little too much. 0.0175. Perfect. All right. So now what you can see here is that I've got a second layer of bricks that's now moved up the right amount and offset over a little bit. Okay, let's hit apply. And what I can do at this point, let's go back to add another array modifier, because, we don't want to add it that way. Let's go 0 and do a y of 1. And just kind of change it up a little bit until we have the same distance between these two blocks as we do between those two. So what would that be? It was 1.5 before. We're now about half of that. So 1.25? That's probably a little bit too much. Let me see here. Whoops, hold on. What I'm doing is I'm moving the object down. And you can tell the spacing between the first two rows is about 12.5 units. Where up here, I'm right now around 15, so that's a little bit too much. Let's do 1.2, a little bit more, 1.21. I'm really just kind of punching the numbers and seeing how it looks. 1.205. That looks pretty good. I think when you get this thing actually assembled, you're not going to be able to tell that there's a little bit of any difference there. And now let me just keep increasing the count a bit. And there's our wall getting built up. Now, how high do we want this wall to be? If I go back to my little chart here, each brick was about 2.5 millimeters. So 2 bricks together is about 1/4 of an inch tall. So let's see. So that's about a 1/2 inch right there. Maybe a little bit more than a 1/2 inch. But approximately, we'll say about 7 rows is about 1 inch. So let's make this about 3 inches tall. So I am going to go with 21. That seems awfully big, doesn't it? It's 7 rows. Okay, I know what happened, right? 7 rows is indeed about 1 inch tall. But this array modifier is in rows of 2. So I just added 21 rows of 2 when I really wanted to add 21 rows total. So let's just do 10 rows. That's much better. In fact, let me just do like 9, a little bit smaller. All right, cool. Now, what I want to do is make this thing look like it's ruined. So here's how that's going to go. So I'm going to start taking away some bricks from these rows. Let's do this. I'm using the circle select, that's C on the keyboard. And I'm just kind of selecting a good chunk of the corner there. So this is what you're going to see then is hit Control L. That does an island select, so that's going to choose all the bricks that are partially selected. Let's hit X and then choose vertices. And now if we go back to it, right, we've got now something that looks like a wall that's missing a chunk of bricks. It's time to go ahead and create the mortar between the bricks. So this is going to be a little bit tricky, but we're going to create one row and more or less be able to use the Array Modifier to go ahead and spread it across all the rows of bricks. So let's do Shift A, add a new cube down here. And I want to position it. So let me go ahead and turn on solid mode. I want to position it so that it's kind of lined up like this. So where it overlaps the brick above it a little bit, well, just barely overlaps the brick above it. And then I'm going to go to edit mode, go back to wireframe, and I want to extend the bottom of it down pretty much almost to the bottom of the brick below it. And then I'm actually going to extend it a little bit above. So kind of create an object that goes pretty close to the bottom of the brick below it to just barely to the brick above it. And then let's select the right edge. And then let's drag that out all the way to the end. And now, if I turn sideways though, hey, it actually just by dumb luck, that's kind of what I'm expecting it to do. I thought I have to adjust the height of it here so that you get a little bit of a dimple, you know, between the rows of bricks. But hey, that actually just by default looks pretty good. But let me just reduce its height just a tiny bit. There we go. That's a little too much. But you know, it's a challenge of, you know, making it, quote, realistic versus making it work in your 3D printer and being able to be visible on the battlefield. So accentuating details like this by making this mortar a little bit thinner than it would be in reality, it's probably not that bad of an idea. Okay. So now, just like with our Array Modifier, or with our bricks, let's take our Array Modifier and duplicate this thing up along the height of the wall. So let's set our relative offset to 0. Let's start here and just kind of start futzing around with the value for the Y until we get something that looks about right. Whoops, hold on, wrong button. And actually, just having an offset of 1 is actually going to be pretty good. Now, how many do I want? Was it 20-ish? That's too many. I end up cutting it down, so let's just... 17. 17 appears to be the magic number. Whoops, it looks like it gets off by a little bit somehow. How strange. Okay, so let me do... You can see here, by the time it gets to the top row, it's just off by a tiny little bit. Well, I'll fix that. So let me go ahead, apply this Array Modifier. Let me fix this little weird buggy thing that's going on at the top. So we can extend that up like that. Now, the problem is, if I switch back to solid mode, we've got a lot more mortar sitting over here where we don't really want any, right? Here's how this is going to work. I'm going to go to edit mode. I want to go to face select mode. So in the upper left hand corner, there's a couple of icons here. I want to choose face select. And then, whoops. And this is going to allow me to select by face instead of by vertices. This is where this will be kind of helpful. That one's fine there. This one here, I'm going to pull this one back in. So what I can do is just kind of pull that back in. So I click the face, and then G, and then the direction I'm moving, in this case X. And this just allows me to pull back each of these layers of mortar to where I think they would be. Whoops, that's not what I want. Alright, well, let me do this. This extra large layer up here for the mortar is causing me some trouble, so I'm just going to fix that. Guess I should have added one more layer and then shrunk it down. Whoops! Let's try a radio cut. I bet that'll work better. There we go. That worked fine. Alright, so there is our brick wall with mortar and all. How about we make it look like a little bit more battle damaged? So this is a little bit more of an advanced step, but let's have some fun, right? Alright, so what I need to do now is we've got actually two objects. I got the mortar and the bricks. So let me go ahead, select both of them, join them together. And now for fun, let's see if we can make it look a little bit more battle damaged. Because right now it looks kind of like a wall that's just missing a few pieces. So if you watched my tutorial on making the desert base, I used sculpting tools in here in Blender. So let's go up to the sculpting layout, and that jumps us right into sculpt mode. So let's select clay. That's the very top one. So this is clay. Radius, strength, doesn't really matter. We want to make sure subtract is selected because I want to remove some material away. And I am going to go in, let's press F to make the brush a little bit larger. Oh, I need to make sure to turn on dynamic typology. Yep, that's fine. Let's do a detail side of like 5 pixels. Let's see how this ends up looking. And all I'm doing is I'm just basically subtracting away clay from these bricks on the edge here, and I'll make them look, well, a little bit more less crappy in a moment, I think. You can kind of do the same thing along the top here. You can kind of just make it look like there's some chunks taken out of top of the wall. And then I can even go in the middle here, push down, and that just kind of punches a few indentations into the bricks. Change the brush size up a little bit, makes things a little bit more random. And I probably should have saved a copy of the wall before I did this, but you know, whoops. Okay, so what I'm gonna do to make it look a little bit less crappy, let's find our smooth. There's our smooth tool over there. And just kind of go over the edge of these bricks a little bit. Now just clean up the 3D models a bit. Go. And just like that, you're kind of left with something that kind of looks like the wall has been punched through a few times. That that may not be the look you're going for. So what I'm going to do, let me add some clay here. And these areas where you can kind of see through the wall. Actually, let me go back and choose some clay strips. And just kind of lay some clay strips down in the areas where you kind of can see through the wall a little bit. And that'll just kind of add a little bit of grungy garbage stuff. Make it a little bit harder to see that there's a nice even hole through the wall there. But I mean, it's battle damage. Something weird could have happened. Yeah, that's fine. There can be a few little holes through the wall. That's fine. I can even probably have some fun take clay strips, go removal mode, and try to even open up some of those holes a little bit and make them look a little bit less even. But you know, that's the basic gist of what you're looking at for creating a wall. What I'm going to do now is just basically make a second copy of the wall or something similar that can slot in right here to form a right angle to support the train piece. But I'll fast forward through this thing because it's basically the same process of what I just did. Looks to be more or less a complete wall. Now there was a little bit of finicky work with the mortar on this side, so that way it can fit inside this these slots over here. Hopefully I got that right, but I won't know for sure until I 3D print things. I also had a little bit of weird side effects from sculpting the damage over here, but that shouldn't mess things up too bad. Now it's time to load this thing into Cura and make sure we can actually print it. Well, it's in Cura and it's printable. If you look at the layers, they look good. The problem is with this particular model is there's pretty much almost no infill. There's a little bit of infill right there, but there's so many tiny little bits and details that, well, it's gonna take forever to print. 4 hours and 43 minutes, even reducing the number of top and bottom layers and things like that. It's still, well, still be a long time. So yeah, so I didn't really think that out too well with the lack of infill layers. So, well, 4 hours, 43 minutes. Guess I better get started printing. So anyway, with that, thanks you guys all for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. I'm the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. Go ahead and subscribe to this YouTube channel here to get the latest videos from tabletop wargaming, robotics, or I got some other different projects coming up in the not too distant future. So thanks for watching and have a great week.